The person who will start off is Geraldine Hazbun, the Director of Undergraduate Studies, who will talk a little bit around where we are on race, on diversity. There have obviously been quite a lot of discussions over the course of Trinity term, and we thought starting this year on a topic like that, which we all know is important to the faculty and where we've agreed we want to take actions, was the right way to start the term. So thank you very much, Geraldine.
Thank you very much, Almut. Thank you everyone for attending. I wanted to start with some broader reflections, some guiding principles that I feel have started to take shape since discussions last term, and then to talk a little bit more about some of the practical implications of where we are and how this looks from my perspective as Director of Undergraduate Studies. So the first slide, which was just kindly put up by Sarah, is a position that I wanted to start with, which is one of accepting that we could do more and we can always do better. And the quotation that I wanted to read out actually was from Gurnam Singh, who says, "While it's not unreasonable to take pride in the broadly free, open and tolerant ethos that higher education aspires to, at the same time there needs to be recognition that, like other institutions, universities are not immune from institutional racism." And I think that's a really powerful reflection to start with. Clearly last term there was a lot of very passionate and very important discussion around questions of diversity and racism and inclusiveness. And the feedback at that time from the student body was very much that we shouldn't be doing things that are seen as performative, that are short-term knee-jerk reactions to the questions that we're dealing with, but really that if we are to make a change to be more diverse, to be more inclusive, this needs to be really taken at the very deepest and most serious levels. And I think that's a reflection that I'm always having to remind myself of and always trying to put into practice whenever I'm faced with these matters at practical levels. So this, for me, as Director of Undergraduate Studies, sits between two places. Essentially, one of them is our division. We're part of the Humanities division, and as such, I see it as my job to help the division and to help colleagues in other humanities subjects be aware of what we do in modern languages and what we do well and where we could improve. So some of what has started has been feeding through information about things like the lectures that we have, the course provision that we have to colleagues in other subjects across the humanities, and that's taking place at divisional level as part of the race action plan. So I've been participating in that, and that's really starting to take a lot of shape this term. But I think working in synchronicity with the division is important, and clearly we need to be also part of the conversations that are going on at the higher university level. But a lot of my job is very detailed and is about sort of detailed implementation of things at the level of the students' courses, at the level of the way things are presented and laid out, and a lot of that to do with regulations and requirements. So it occurred to me quite early on that if we're going to do this properly, it's not just about developing certain themes or certain papers or offshoots of things that we do. It's about looking at the absolute core of our syllabus and the papers that we offer, but also the information we put out there to the world and looking at where there are problems and where they need to be addressed. So this goes off in lots of different directions. Some of them are more detailed than others. And I want to talk a little bit around diversifying the curriculum and some of the implications of that first of all, and then talk around a couple of other questions that are related to that. So the first thing that occurs when one thinks about diversity is looking at what there is that we do and what we could publicise better. So it became quite clear last term that there are things that we do that the student body weren't necessarily aware of. There are research areas that my colleagues work on that are very pertinent. There are papers that we offer that give students a chance to look at authors from non-white and non-European backgrounds, but that they're not always widely available or clear, or that we've got the information in the wrong places. So at the moment I'm trying to unearth that and trying to look at how we can present that information better. But I know that that's a very, very small drop in the ocean in terms of defining progress. At the moment we've made a change to a new portal, to Canvas, and I think this has given us a lot of chance to reflect on how we present information more generally, what you would want to see on the front page of any of our documents or our online publications. And so So there's been a lot of discussion, and I think a lot of productive discussion around how we group things, how we organise things, that I would like to talk to the student body a lot more about through the JCC. I think also, as I was saying, it's not just about extra papers. We can do that. We could think about courses on colonialism, on legacies. There are certain things that can be done. But I think we also need to look at core papers, and we need to look at the way the things that we do that are central to our course and the way it's laid out are articulated, even down to the wording in handbooks, even down to the periodization of certain topics and things that might be problematic in that regard. So I would be very keen to actually look at that information and look at, you know, the concept of the handbook, which is one that Oxford is quite wedded to, and look at whether we could do things more creatively and organise material better in a way that might actually present to the student body more chance to look at a wider range of material and to know what's there as well. So these seem to be relatively small issues, but I think they can have a really big impact, and you know, certainly that would help us to see whether there are core omissions in key places. The other area of my job is also to do with clearly attainment and standards, and I think this is a question that I would be very interested in hearing wider views about, which is the question of workload and the particular challenges that students from different backgrounds have when they come to Oxford, and how they see themselves in relation to the expectations of a world-leading course. And we've also done a lot, we've had to do a lot to adapt the courses, the examinations, because of COVID. And I'd like to see that as a chance to move forward and to possibly move forward more quickly. I think there are things that we've done because of COVID that have forced us to realise that we can change, and we can actually do so in a more agile manner than we might have thought possible. So, I mean, again, these are things that are relatively small but are essential to what we do. Like, if we want to change the content of the paper, can we do that more quickly? Can we fast track things through regulations? Can we get through some of the bureaucratic structures more quickly to try to execute change? So I'm very interested in thinking around these questions as well, which I think could make quite a difference. But I also am very conscious that diversity is not to be seen as a problem or a weakness, but as a strength. We don't want to necessarily assume that students from different backgrounds come with a set of problems or need special help that they may not have. So I'm also very keen to hear views about not patronising and not putting students in a position where we might make them feel singled out and awkward and not part of a wider group because of that. There are other things I could talk about. I know my colleagues in Portuguese have done a diversity audit, so we're looking to see how that will feed back and whether we can do that more widely across the different subfaculties. But my last point would also be a more general one, again, just to open out to the floor potentially later on, which is in modern languages, we obviously have a duty to look at certain countries, certain languages in appropriate and inclusive and diverse ways. But I think with that, there's also the question of our dialogue in the UK across the sector. You know, where do we want to see ourselves as a modern languages department in relation to other departments in the UK? So it's a twofold conversation as well. You know, we have a duty to represent certain languages appropriately, but also to think about our own position and our own duties within the UK sector. So in short, I think what I'm doing ranges from the extremely particular to correcting handbooks to, I think, some very broad questions, and you know, I would welcome as much help and feedback as I can get from colleagues on the different parts of that journey.